Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She thought it was funny. A late-night post, one throwaway joke about me, about my skills, as she called them. She must have laughed when she hit upload, probably with a glass of wine in her hand, imagining her friends cackling at my expense. But when I woke up the next morning, my phone wasn't full of notifications from her. It was full of pity. People didn't laugh at her joke. They pitied the man she tried to humiliate. They pitied me, and in doing so, they exposed her. I stared at the screen, reading the comments beneath her post. The smirks disguised as sympathy. The not-so-subtle digs about why someone would publicly embarrass their partner like that. And then the shift. Her friends weren't laughing. They were circling her like vultures, dropping comments that made her look desperate, mean, pathetic. She had tried to pull me down, and instead, she was the one sinking. I didn't respond. Not a word. I didn't message her. I didn't defend myself. Silence became my shield. At work, I went through the motions, unreadable, unshaken. But inside, the decision had already formed. This wasn't about a joke. It was about respect. And she had crossed the line where respect no longer lived. When I got home, she was waiting in the kitchen. Her smile was too wide, too forced. She asked if I'd seen her post, brushing it off like it was harmless fun. I didn't answer. I set my keys down, poured myself a glass of water, and walked upstairs. No fight, no lecture, just silence. That silence hit harder than any argument could. By the time she came to bed, her phone was face down on the nightstand, but I had already seen the numbers. The likes she thought she'd rack up had turned sour. Comments piled up beneath her joke, not in laughter, but in pity. People saying things like, "This is sad," or "Why would you post this about your husband?" She was trying to sleep, but I could hear the restless shifting, the tossing under the covers. She was awake long after I closed my eyes. That night, I understood something simple and sharp. She had handed me the rope with which her own image would hang. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to defend myself. All I had to do was step back and let her world collapse under the weight of her own words. And as the hours dragged on, I could almost feel it. Her lying awake beside me, scrolling, deleting, regretting. Not because she cared about me, but because she was watching her perfect image crumble in real time. That was just the beginning. The day after her little stunt, the house felt different. Not because she had apologized, she hadn't, but because she knew I wasn't going to. I moved through the kitchen quietly, poured my coffee, checked my emails at the table. She tried to fill the silence with small talk, her voice too bright, too casual, as if nothing had happened. I didn't bite. My answers were short, deliberate. Fine. Busy. Later. Each word landed like a brick, building a wall between us she couldn't climb. By afternoon, the fallout from her post was obvious. Friends weren't backing her up. Some unfollowed. Others left comments that bled through her fake confidence. She deleted the post, but it was too late. Screenshots had already made the rounds. I knew because one of my coworkers pulled me aside with a sympathetic look and said, "Man, I saw what she wrote. That's rough." I shrugged, calm, controlled, and said, "Not as rough as it'll be for her." He looked at me differently after that. Not with pity, but with respect. When I got home that night, she was waiting again. This time, her tone was defensive. She said people were overreacting, that it was just a joke, that I was taking it too seriously. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look up from my phone. I just told her calmly, "The internet remembers longer than you think." Her mouth opened, ready to argue, but nothing came out. She shut it again and turned away, pretending to be busy with the dishes. That weekend, we went to a friend's party. Normally, she thrived in those settings, the center of attention with her stories and her charm. But that night, the energy shifted. People looked at her differently. A few whispered when she walked past. Others avoided eye contact altogether. She tried to laugh louder, smile brighter, but it was obvious. They weren't laughing with her anymore. They were watching her stumble. I didn't rescue her. I didn't step in with jokes or smooth explanations like I used to. I let the silence stretch, the awkward moments linger. And when one of her friends pulled me aside and quietly asked if everything was okay at home, I simply said, "She's figuring out who she really is." That was all it took. The message was clear without me ever raising my voice. That night, she barely spoke on the drive home. She sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone, no doubt trying to salvage the wreckage she'd created. But pity was already poisoning her brand, her friendships, her image. She had set the trap, and now she was caught in it. And I hadn't even lifted a finger. The more she tried to patch the damage, the clearer it became that her world was unraveling. I didn't have to argue with her or point out her mistakes. All I had to do was step back and let the silence speak for me. And it did, louder than words ever could. At home, I stopped sharing the small things she used to rely on. No updates about my day, no jokes across the kitchen table, no reminders of bills or errands. I handled my life quietly, efficiently, without her. If she asked where I was going, I said out. If she asked what I was doing, I said working. I never lied. I just never gave her the information she craved. At first, she brushed it off like nothing had changed. She kept pretending everything was fine, cooking dinners she thought would smooth things over, slipping her hand into mine on the couch like she used to. But my hand didn't stay there long. I'd stand up, grab my keys, and leave. Her eyes would follow me to the door, but her voice never stopped me. She knew if she pushed, she'd only hear more silence. Online, the pity she had invited didn't fade, it grew. People remembered. Screenshots resurfaced in group chats she thought I didn't know about. Even her closest friends started to distance themselves. They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at her. And she couldn't control it. For the first time, the stage she had built for herself wasn't lifting her higher, it was burying her. One night, I came home late and found her sitting in the dark, the glow of her phone screen lighting her face. She looked up, eyes red, lips pressed tight like she'd been crying. She asked why I was acting so cold, why I wouldn't talk to her. I didn't answer. I walked past her, upstairs, and shut the bedroom door. She stayed on the couch until morning. That became her routine. Nights awake, scrolling, trying to claw her way back into the image she once controlled. Mornings quiet, brittle, forced. She stopped posting jokes, stopped trying to be the loudest one in the room. The attention she craved had turned into a spotlight she couldn't escape, and it burned her every time. Meanwhile, I was changing. I worked out more, dressed sharper, invested in myself in ways I hadn't in years. Friends noticed. Colleagues noticed. And she noticed too. The man she once mocked was slipping further out of her reach, becoming someone stronger, colder, untouchable. And the more she reached for me, the more she realized her grip was gone. Her post was gone, but the stain it left wasn't. The pity that had clung to me now wrapped itself around her, and everywhere we went, it followed. At first, she pretended not to notice. But I saw it in the way her smile cracked when someone mentioned social media, in the way her hand twitched toward her phone whenever laughter broke out across a room. She was terrified people were laughing at her. And they were. I made no effort to shield her. In the past, I would have jumped in, softened her edges, made excuses when her sharp tongue pushed people away. Not anymore. At dinners, I let her sit in the silence she created. At gatherings, I answered questions directly, calmly, while she floundered with nervous jokes that no one laughed at. She had once built herself up by cutting me down. Now she was shrinking in the shadow of her own choices. The shift became undeniable one evening at a friend's barbecue. She tried to make a joke at my expense again, lighter this time, desperate to prove she could still command a laugh. But instead of laughter, the group went quiet. One of our friends glanced at me with sympathy, then looked at her with something colder, sharper. She stammered, tried to explain herself, but the silence that followed was brutal. People changed the subject. She was left standing there, exposed, the queen stripped of her crown. On the drive home, she sat stiff in the passenger seat, her phone clenched in her lap. She didn't speak. For once, she didn't even try to defend herself. She knew. The power she had fed on for years was gone. The crowd she once performed for had turned away. At home, she broke the silence. She said people were misinterpreting her, that they didn't get her sense of humor. She begged me to believe her. I didn't answer. I walked upstairs, showered, and went to bed. She stayed downstairs long into the night, pacing, crying quietly when she thought I couldn't hear. That was the moment I realized she wasn't fighting me anymore. She was fighting the mirror, the reflection of the person she had become. And the more she struggled, the clearer it became to everyone around us that she wasn't the woman she pretended to be. I didn't need to expose her. She had already done it herself. All I had to do was let the silence hang, let the pity grow, until it crushed her completely. And it was working. The house used to be her stage. She filled every room with noise. Every conversation bent around her voice. Every decision filtered through what she wanted. But after that night at the barbecue, I stripped the stage away piece by piece. It didn't take shouting or arguments. It just took absence. I stopped reminding her about anything that kept her world steady. Bills, appointments, small errands. I handled what mattered to me and left the rest. The first time she noticed was when her car ran out of gas. She stormed into the house, snapping that I should have filled it like I always did. I looked at her calmly and said, "Not my problem anymore." Then I walked past her, leaving her frozen in the doorway. Her routines collapsed next. She was used to me picking up slack when she lost focus, but I didn't lift a finger. Laundry piled up. The sink filled with dishes she ignored until the smell forced her to deal with it. I cooked for myself, ate quietly, and left her staring at an empty seat across the table. At first, she tried to frame it as independence, telling friends she was taking on more responsibility, finding her strength. But those same friends had already seen the cracks. They knew the truth before she did. She wasn't finding her strength. She was losing mine. At night, the silence was heavier than ever. She used to turn away from me in bed, confident in the distance she created. Now she faced me, wide-eyed, waiting for a word, a touch, anything. I gave her nothing. The same emptiness she had forced on me became her punishment, and it gnawed at her. She lay awake long after I closed my eyes, scrolling through her phone, typing messages and deleting them before sending. The pity she had tried to throw at me was now hers to carry. People whispered about her choices, her cruelty, her downfall. Even her family started to ask questions, subtle at first, sharper with time. And every time they did, I stayed calm, measured, never raising my voice. Just a look, just a pause, and they saw the truth without me needing to explain. She had turned me into a punchline once. Now, she was the joke, and the laughter was gone. All that was left was pity, and I wasn't finished yet. Her desperation became impossible to hide. She hovered around me constantly now, asking questions she hadn't cared about in years. Where was I going? Who was I with? When would I be home? Each time I answered with the same calm detachment. Out. With people. Later. My words weren't lies. They were weapons, slicing through her certainty and leaving her drowning in doubt. At first, she tried to reassert control. She suggested weekend trips, little getaways, as if changing the scenery could erase what she had done. I declined each time, polite but firm. No excuses, no explanations. Just no. That word alone unsettled her more than an argument ever could. She wasn't used to hearing it from me. Then came the suspicion. One night, I walked in late from the gym and found her pretending to fold my laundry. Her hands lingered on receipts I'd left in my pockets, eyes searching for evidence of another woman. When she noticed me watching, she forced a smile and muttered something about helping out. I didn't call her out. I didn't reassure her. I just walked past, letting the silence crush her imagination. The truth was simpler and harsher than she realized. I wasn't sneaking around. I didn't need someone else. What I needed was distance, and I already had it. She thought she could compete with another woman. She didn't understand she was competing with the version of me who had finally stopped needing her. That was the battle she couldn't win. The shift reached a breaking point when her own friends began to pull away. I overheard one of them on speakerphone telling her to be careful about what she posted online. Another said she didn't recognize her anymore. Her responses were defensive, brittle, laced with fear. When she hung up, I saw the tears she tried to hide. I didn't comfort her. I didn't even acknowledge it. I let her sit in the silence, the same silence she had once weaponized against me. Meanwhile, I was building. I moved money into private accounts. I secured documents, cleared out the essentials piece by piece, so quietly she didn't notice. Every step I took was precise, deliberate. She had mocked me publicly, stripped me of dignity with a careless post. Now I was dismantling her world without raising my voice. At night, she lay awake, tossing, scrolling, whispering into her phone with friends who no longer gave her the reassurance she wanted. And beside her, I slept soundly, untouched by her chaos. Because I knew what she didn't. The end was already in motion. And when it came, she would have no stage left to stand on. The wall she had built around her image began to crumble in public, not just online. I didn't need to push. I just let the silence do the work, and it exposed her faster than any confrontation could. It started when I stopped covering for her mistakes. At dinners with friends, when someone asked why she hadn't been around much, I didn't offer excuses. I simply said, "She's been busy with herself." The words were sharp enough without volume, and the looks they gave her told me they understood. At family gatherings, when questions about our marriage surfaced, I didn't smooth things over. I smiled faintly and said, "Things aren't what they look like." That was all. Enough to leave her squirming under the weight of eyes that once admired her. Her charm used to fill every room. Now it only drew silence. People remembered that post, remembered how she had turned me into a joke for attention. They didn't laugh at her wit anymore. They pitied her desperation. And the pity was worse than mockery. It stripped her of authority, of the mask she had worn so easily. One evening we attended a small party at a mutual friend's house. She made another attempt to reclaim control, slipping into old habits, telling a half-story with a jab at me hidden inside. It used to guarantee laughter. This time, the room went still. A woman across the table frowned and asked, "Why would you say that about him?" My wife froze, stammered, and tried to backtrack, but the silence around her was louder than any rebuke. I didn't say a word. I just sipped my drink, letting her choke on the weight of her own words. On the drive home, she tried to explain herself. She said people didn't understand her humor, that they were too sensitive. I didn't respond. My silence was more cutting than anything I could have said. She turned her face toward the window, tears glinting in her eyes that she refused to let fall. At home, she collapsed on the couch, scrolling through her phone, desperate for validation from the same people who had once fueled her confidence. But the messages were different now. They weren't applause. They were polite, cautious, pitying. She was no longer the star of her own show. She was the cautionary tale. And I sat in the chair across from her, calm and steady, watching the empire she had built on mockery collapse around her. She had turned me into a punchline once. Now she was the one living in silence, waiting for the world to laugh again, but no one was laughing. Her stage was gone, and I wasn't finished tearing down the lights. The first open step toward my new life was small, but undeniable. I started showing up differently. At work, I dressed sharper, carried myself with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. People noticed. Colleagues asked if I was seeing someone, if I had something new going on. I just smiled and said, "I've been investing in myself." That was all. Enough to shift the way they looked at me. No longer with pity, but with respect. At home, the change unsettled her. She noticed the new clothes, the way I styled my hair, the hours I spent at the gym. She asked questions she didn't want answers to. "Who are you dressing up for? Why are you always out so late?" Her voice carried fear, not authority. I gave her the same calm reply every time. For me, nothing more. She hated it. The silence between us grew heavier, not because I avoided her, but because I no longer needed her. She wasn't the center of my day anymore. She was a shadow in the background of a life I was rebuilding piece by piece. And she felt it. The woman who once fed off attention was now starving for scraps of mine, and I offered none. The turning point came at another gathering. This time it was with my colleagues, people who had seen the fallout of her post, but never said it outright. I invited her, not to protect her image, but to expose the truth. She arrived overdressed, too eager, clinging to my arm with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She tried to charm the group, but every attempt fell flat. When someone complimented me on my progress at work, she laughed too loudly and said, "I guess he finally figured out how to be useful." The words hung in the air like smoke. But this time, the room didn't laugh. One of my coworkers shook her head and said, "You should be proud of him, not mocking him." My wife's face drained of color. She forced a smile, but the moment was already carved into the night. For once, the room wasn't on her side. They were on mine. On the drive home, she was silent. Her hands trembled on her phone, scrolling endlessly, searching for comfort that wasn't coming. I sat calm, steady, watching the reflection of her panic in the window. She had spent years mocking me in public, certain no one would question her. Now, her own audience was gone. That night, I packed another bag of essentials and placed it in my car. She didn't notice. She was too busy lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't just losing her image. She was losing me. By the time I reached the 9th step of my quiet plan, I was already gone in every way that mattered. The only thing left was the physical exit, and even that was nearly complete. Most of my essentials had been moved, tucked away where she couldn't touch them. Money rerouted, documents secured, keys replaced. All that remained was timing. She didn't see it coming, though the signs were everywhere. She was too busy fighting ghosts, scrolling through comments, replaying her mistakes, trying to rewrite the image she had shattered with one careless post. At night, she tossed in bed, whispering half apologies I never acknowledged. In the mornings, she watched me carefully, as if studying me might give her back the man she'd once mocked. She didn't realize that man no longer existed. I had grown sharper, stronger, more distant with each passing day. And people noticed. Friends who once pitied me now sought my company. Colleagues respected me in ways they hadn't before. Even strangers treated me differently, sensing the shift in how I carried myself. She saw it too, and it terrified her. Because the more I rose, the smaller she became. The breaking point came when her own family invited us over for dinner. She clung to me at the table, desperate to present a united front. But when her father asked how things were going, I told the truth in my own calm, unshakable way. I said, "I've been doing better than ever." The words were simple, but they cut deep. Her parents looked at her with questions in their eyes, questions she couldn't answer. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. The mask slipped, and everyone saw it. That night, she cornered me in the kitchen. Her voice shook as she demanded to know if I was leaving her. I looked her in the eye and said nothing. The silence broke her more than words ever could. She reached for me, but I stepped past her, collected my bag from the hall, and left the house for the night. I didn't explain where I was going. I didn't promise to come back. She sat alone in that house, the same house where she had once felt untouchable, staring at the empty space I had left behind. And for the first time, she didn't just fear losing her reputation. She feared losing me completely. What she didn't know was that she already had. The final step came quietly, without a fight, without a scene. I woke early one morning, packed the last of my things into the car, and left the key to the house on the counter. There was no note, no explanation. She didn't deserve words from me anymore. She had used them as weapons, sharpened into jokes that cut deep in public, thinking she'd never pay for them. But now the silence was hers to carry. When she woke and found the space beside her empty, she must have thought I was at the gym or on an early call. But as the hours passed, the truth set in. My clothes were gone. My documents, my shoes, the watch she once gave me, all missing. I had erased myself from the house the way she had tried to erase me online. Quiet. Precise. Final. The text started mid-morning. At first, lighthearted. "Where are you?" Then sharper. "Why are your things gone?" By evening, they turned frantic. "Please, come back. We can fix this." I didn't respond. I let the silence answer for me. Each hour without a reply was another nail in the coffin she had built with her own hands. Meanwhile, I was in my new place. Bare walls, quiet rooms, nothing but my essentials. And yet it felt lighter, freer, more alive than the house I'd left behind. I wasn't weighed down by her noise anymore. I wasn't defined by her jokes or her pity. I was simply myself again. The fallout reached her faster than I expected. Friends stopped calling. Family stopped defending her. Screenshots of her posts still floated around. Reminders of the moment she thought humiliation was funny. Now, every like she once chased turned into silence. Every laugh she expected turned into pity. And the pity was worse than the laughter. It was permanent. One night, weeks later, I saw her name flash across my phone. I let it ring. Then another message appeared. For words, desperate and broken. "I can't sleep anymore." I put the phone face down and let it buzz until it went quiet. She had spent years turning me into the butt of her jokes, confident I'd always be there to laugh along or swallow the sting. But I wasn't her audience anymore. I wasn't even in the room. Now she lies awake, scrolling through a world that no longer applauds her, counting regrets she can never erase. And I sleep soundly, untouched by the noise, because the silence belongs to me. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.